Leonardo Martins had always lived by the clock, sharp suits, tighter schedules. But that day at the airport, destiny had other plans. In a frantic rush, he snatched a suitcase that wasn't his, too focused on calls and deals to even notice. Life has a strange way of humbling the proud, doesn't it? And right there, among the chaos, the seeds of an emotional story were quietly planted. The zipper gave up first. Right in front of the crowd, the suitcase exploded open, scattering clothes, a pair of lacy lingerie, and, oh boy, a glowing vibrator that rolled across the floor like a neon bullet.
Hello, I'm going to tell you this incredible story. Remember that to receive new stories like this, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, and activate the notification bell. Let's get to the rest of the story.
Gasps filled the terminal as if they were at the climax of one of those touching stories you only see in movies. Leonardo froze, the color draining from his face faster than a bank transfer. Enter Isabela Costa, fierce and fiery, chasing after her runaway suitcase and her dignity. Their eyes met, wide with horror, and for a few precious seconds, the entire world fell silent. It wasn't the romantic first encounter poets dream of, but real story rarely comes wrapped with a bow. Sometimes it's messy, humiliating, and blindingly human. And that's exactly where true connection begins. The phones were already out, filming, capturing every cringeworthy detail for the world to see. Leonardo wanted to disappear, but Isabela? She just laughed, a raw, infectious sound that cracked through the tension like sunlight after a storm. That laugh, that spirit, stirred something in him, something he hadn't felt in years. It was the beginning of an emotional story neither of them could have seen coming. Airport security got involved, of course. Chaos is a way of snowballing when you least expect it. Still, between apologies, paperwork, and awkward silences, something fragile and unexpected began to form. As they stumbled through the mess, a strange sort of alliance was born, stitched together by embarrassment and an unspoken, what the heck just happened, understanding. By the time they walked away from the scene, Leonardo and Isabela had exchanged a handful of half-smiles, a few sarcastic remarks, and one undeniable truth. Life doesn't always go according to plan, and maybe that's where the magic hides. Little did they know, the universe had just pressed play on a real story far more unpredictable and touching than either of them could ever script. With the echoes of that chaotic moment still clinging to their skin, fate wasn't quite finished with them yet. Because sometimes when you think the storm is over, life throws you right back into the eye of it. Only this time, wearing a business suit. Later that same day, fate decided it wasn't done playing its little tricks. Leonardo walked into a high-stakes meeting with Japanese investors, expecting the usual tight scripts and controlled smiles. Instead, he found Isabela sitting confidently at the conference table like she belonged there. You could almost hear destiny laughing in the background, weaving another emotional story ready to unfold. Their eyes locked, and an invisible electric current zapped between them. Part shock, part unspoken dare. It was the kind of moment that you read about in touching stories, where two worlds crash headfirst without a safety net. Leonardo tightened his jaw. Isabela smirked knowingly. There was no going back to pretending they were strangers now. The real story was already far too complicated for that. Trying to navigate the meeting was like walking on a tightrope made of sarcasm. Leonardo clung to his professional mask, but cracks kept showing through every witty jab Isabela threw his way. She wasn't playing by the corporate rulebook. She was rewriting it with every fearless, unapologetic word. It was maddening. It was thrilling. And somewhere deep down, it was wildly freeing. As the meeting dragged on, something started shifting inside Leonardo. It wasn't just annoyance anymore. It was fascination. There was a rawness to Isabela, a refusal to filter herself for the sake of appearances. It reminded him painfully of who he used to be before boardrooms and quarterly targets swallowed him whole. That realization hit him harder than any financial loss ever could. When the investors finally left, Leonardo found himself lingering, trading barbed jokes and meaningful glances with Isabela. There was an edge to their conversation, like standing on a cliff, both daring the other to jump first. This wasn't just professional tension anymore. It was the messy, beautiful kind of friction that fuels the best emotional story you've ever heard whispered late at night. Strangely enough, Leonardo felt alive. Not the buzz he got from closing a deal, but the gut-deep rush of truly being seen. Isabela wasn't afraid to call him out, challenge him, push him. And against all his better judgment, he liked it. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to success than climbing corporate ladders. Maybe real connection came from climbing out of your own cage. As the sun dipped below the skyscrapers that night, Leonardo wasn't thinking about profits or quarterly reports. He was thinking about a woman who had stormed into his life with all the subtlety of a lightning bolt. And something told him that this emotional storm had only just begun. A week later, Leonardo found himself at a corporate art gala, a place he usually endured rather than enjoyed. But that night, as he wandered past paintings he barely understood, someone, caught his eye. There she was, Isabela, standing proudly beside her artwork, her eyes sparkling with life. Real Story has a way of surprising you when you least expect it, doesn't it? He tried to play it cool, blending into the crowd, but there was no mistaking the magnetic pull between them. Watching her talk about her art, about chaos and passion and the beauty of imperfection, shook something loose inside him. Emotional story after emotional story seemed stitched into every canvas she had touched. Suddenly, those messy, colorful paintings made more sense than any business plan ever had. Mid-conversation, Isabela accidentally knocked over a glass of wine, sending it splashing across the marble floor. Gasps echoed through the room, but she just laughed, shrugging it off with a charm only she could pull off. Leonardo couldn't help but smile. It was messy. It was human. It was the kind of moment you never see coming. The heartbeat of touching stories that linger in your mind long after the night ends. As he approached her, he realized that Isabela was everything the corporate world tried to beat out of you. Fearless, imperfect, alive. Standing there, surrounded by stiff suits and whispered judgments, she was a vivid splash of color in a gray, suffocating room. And maybe, just maybe, that's what he had been searching for without even knowing it. A real story to color outside the lines of his carefully built life. Their conversation flowed easily, painting invisible strokes of connection between them. She teased him about his stiff posture. He joked about her clumsy elegance. Beneath the laughter, though, a deeper current was pulling them together. The undeniable truth that sometimes the best plans are the ones you never make. And wasn't that the core of every emotional story worth telling? Later that night, as Leonardo stared at one of her paintings, a chaotic whirlwind of colors that somehow made perfect sense, he felt something he hadn't in years. Awe. For the first time in forever, he wasn't thinking about outcomes, strategies, or risks. He was just there, present, tangled up in the beautiful mess of the moment, where touching stories and real story began. As the gala lights dimmed and the last of the wine glasses clinked in the distance, one thing was certain. Leonardo's perfectly organized world was beginning to crack open. And through those cracks, a wild, colorful new chapter was already slipping in. Business trips for Leonardo were supposed to be predictable. Flights, meetings, polished handshakes. But that countryside trip turned into anything but. Halfway through nowhere, his luxury car coughed, sputtered, and died by the side of a dirt road. Great, right? As he kicked the tire in frustration, a beat-up old pickup pulled over, and out hopped Isabela. Grinning like this was just another page in an emotional story waiting to be told. Forced to abandon the wrecked car, they ended up at a rustic little inn, the kind that smelled like cinnamon and rain-soaked wood. Only one room was available, of course, because Real Story doesn't believe in coincidences. Isabela didn't miss a beat. She tossed her bag on the bed, kicked off her shoes, and claimed half the room like she owned it. Leonardo, meanwhile, tried not to hyperventilate. That night, stripped of their expensive armor, no suits, no heels, just flannel pajamas and nervous laughter, they talked. Really talked. About fears, failures, dreams too fragile to say out loud. It was the kind of conversation you only have when the walls come down, when you're sitting cross-legged on a creaky bed with someone who, somehow, already knows the parts of you you usually hide. It was pure emotional story magic. Isabela spoke of painting barefoot at sunrise, of losing her father too young, of choosing chaos over safety every single time. Leonardo spoke of boardroom betrayals, of a mother who once told him being vulnerable was weakness, and of the hollow ache he carried despite every shiny success. They traded pieces of their souls like kids trading baseball cards, not knowing they were building something far stronger than trust. Later, as they sat outside under a sea of stars, the silence between them felt sacred. There were no deals to negotiate, no impressions to protect, just the honest, terrifying beauty of being seen. And maybe that's what all the best touching stories have in common. They start not when two people impress each other, but when they drop every mask and meet, heart to heart. Leonardo found himself laughing more freely that night than he had in years, his carefully maintained walls crumbling under the weight of her easy, fearless joy. It was messy. It was imperfect. It was real story unfolding in real time. Not a script, not a strategy, just life, raw and breathtakingly alive. As the night deepened and the crickets sang their chorus, a feeling settled in Leonardo's chest, a feeling he couldn't name yet. But deep down, he knew, no matter how hard he tried to return to his old life, some invisible part of him had already crossed a line. And the journey back would never be quite so simple again. Just when it seemed like things were finally falling into place, life threw its signature curveball. Isabela received an invitation to a prestigious art residency in Florence, a dream she'd clung to through every heartbreak and setback. It should have been pure joy, right? But emotional story plots have a way of twisting when you least expect. Leonardo watched her light up with excitement, and all he could do was smile, even as his heart quietly shattered. The offer was everything she had worked for: recognition, freedom, a chance to leave her mark on the world. Yet underneath the celebration, there was a storm brewing. Staying meant love. Leaving meant dreams. Touching stories often demand impossible choices, and now Isabela was trapped between two futures, both equally beautiful and terrifying. Leonardo, knowing her better than he ever thought possible, refused to be the anchor that held her back. Without telling her, he sat down one night, poured every ounce of emotion into a letter, and mailed it. No grand speeches, no desperate pleas. Just a simple, heartfelt message. Chase your dreams. I'll be cheering for you, no matter where you are. It was an act of pure, selfless love, the kind real story heroes are made of, though they never see themselves that way. The day Isabela found the letter, she cried. Not because she was sad, but because she knew exactly what it meant. True love doesn't cage you. It hands you the key and lets you fly. And in that bittersweet moment, their emotional story carved itself deeper into their souls, promising that distance could never erase what they had built together. As Isabela boarded her flight to Florence, she looked back one last time, scanning the crowd for a familiar face she knew wouldn't be there. Leonardo stayed behind, honoring the silent promise they'd made to each other. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do in an emotional story is to let go, trusting that if it's meant to be, life will find a way to weave you back together. In Florence, surrounded by ancient streets and the smell of fresh paint, Isabela bloomed. Yet every masterpiece she created carried echoes of a man who believed in her before she truly believed in herself. She was living her dream, yes, but every day, the real story of her heart whispered a different kind of longing. As the months passed and the seasons shifted, both Leonardo and Isabela realized something profound. Success meant little if you had no one to share it with. And sometimes, the real journey isn't chasing what you think you want. It's finding the courage to return to what you truly need. Months later, on a rainy afternoon in New York, Leonardo stood in front of Stone Innovations, watching the city pulse with 1,000 different lives. He had built this empire brick by brick, but it never felt emptier. That's the thing about emotional stories. They don't let you hide behind success. They remind you, again and again, that trophies mean nothing if your heart isn't full. Then, out of the blue, like a plot twist you don't see coming in touching stories, there she was. Isabela, suitcase in hand, soaked to the bone, but smiling like she owned the storm. Without a grand speech or dramatic gesture, she simply said, "Let's start over." No expectations, no scripts, just us. And just like that, the real story picked up right where it had left off, a little battered, maybe, but stronger than ever. They decided to rebuild, not just their relationship, but everything they touched. Isabela brought creativity and chaos into stone innovations, while Leonardo brought structure and strategy to her dreams. Together, they turned the company into something revolutionary, a place where creativity thrived alongside innovation. A living, breathing, emotional story hidden inside a world of glass offices and sharp suits. Of course, not everyone welcomed the change. Rivals plotted, investors grumbled, whispers of doubt swirled like smoke. But touching stories aren't made by playing it safe. Leonardo and Isabela leaned on each other, their bond forged through every mistake, every triumph, every late-night brainstorming session fueled by bad coffee and even worse ideas, some of which turned out to be the best ones. They fought sometimes passionately, stubbornly, but even their fights were different now. They fought for each other, not against. Every disagreement was just another layer of their real story, messy and raw and breathtakingly alive. Love wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a daily choice, a gritty, beautiful decision to keep building, even when it would be easier to walk away. As months rolled into years, stone innovations became a symbol of what could happen when heart and mind worked together instead of apart. Leonardo no longer chased empty victories. He built legacies, the kind whispered about in late-night conversations and scribbled into the margins of touching stories passed down through generations. But even as success grew, Leonardo knew the real masterpiece wasn't the empire they built. It was the life they carved out of chaos, a messy, imperfect, brilliant real story that would keep unfolding with every sunrise they greeted together. Have you ever experienced a moment where one small accident changed your entire life? Do you believe that chaos might be the universe's way of steering us to where we truly belong? I'd love to hear your real story, those emotional story moments that caught you off guard and left you forever changed. Drop your touching stories in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone who's still waiting for their unexpected miracle. And hey, if you felt a spark in your heart following this journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss the next real stories we have coming your way. Because sometimes the smallest twist of fate leads to the greatest story of your life.